From ABC7 New York, this is Eyewitness News Extra Time.
Images of instant infamy today in New York City. For the first time in American history, a former American president is now a criminal defendant. And good evening, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Eyewitness News Extra Time. I'm Bill Vidal.
And I'm Liz Cho. Tonight, we are diving into all of the details surrounding the arraignment of former President Donald Trump. He surrendered this afternoon in Lower Manhattan and pleaded not guilty to 34 felony counts of falsifying business records.
The next scheduled court appearance in this case set for early December, right in the cusp of presidential primary season.
We have live team coverage to help us dig deeper into one of the biggest political stories and legal stories of our time, beginning with Eyewitness News reporter Jim Dolan. He's in Lower Manhattan. Jim.
Liz, the people versus Donald J. Trump. 34 felony counts, most related to a couple of steamy sexual encounters the former president would probably rather have kept quiet, but have now come back to turn the former commander-in-chief into a criminal defendant. A scowling Donald Trump walked into a courtroom in Lower Manhattan today, the first former president ever to sit as the defendant in a criminal case. In court, Trump, not his lawyers, pleaded not guilty to 34 Class E felony counts, the lowest level of felony, all related to falsifying business records in connection with hush money payments the president is said to have made to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Alvin Bragg is Manhattan's district attorney.
Less than 2 weeks before the presidential election, Michael Cohen wired $130,000 to Stormy Daniels' lawyer. That payment was to hide damaging information from the voting public. The participant scheme was illegal. The scheme violated New York election law.
I think that what you saw in the indictment that was unsealed today is exactly what has been talked about for the past 7 years, and the district attorney has turned what is actually a completely political issue into a political prosecution. And it's not a good day.
Trump was in court a little less than an hour and did not talk to reporters when he left. He headed to the airport, his brief, unpleasant trip to New York behind him. It was a defiant Donald Trump who left his home in Midtown this afternoon and headed to the courthouse. En route, Trump posted on social media. "Seems so surreal," he wrote. "Wow, they are going to arrest me. Can't believe this is happening in America." It did. At the courthouse, Mr. Trump surrendered to the Manhattan district attorney and was booked and fingerprinted. No mugshot was taken for Trump. As for the felony counts against him,
prosecutorial discretion are the two most important words in our criminal justice system.
Trump was charged with Class E felonies, but similar cases have been charged in the past as misdemeanors.
It'll be interesting as the weeks and months here progress to see what the actual evidence is, not the information that's out in the world, but what the evidence is, who the witnesses will be, and how quickly this case will move through the system.
Trump boarded his plane at LaGuardia Airport with the promise that he will talk about the charges from Mar-A-Lago tonight. There is a long way to go before anything approaching a resolution in this case. The next court appearance for Donald Trump isn't scheduled until December. A trial won't likely get started until next spring, a year from now. So still plenty to go. The judge asked Mr. Trump to temper his rhetoric in the meantime. We'll see. Reporting live from Lower Manhattan, Jim Dolan, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
We will see indeed. Jim, I think, charges aside, I think what was the most striking about today was how tempered Donald Trump was while he was inside that courthouse. He kept saying before his arraignment that he might talk to reporters before and after, and all we saw was that very sour look on his face and nothing else.
Yeah, he didn't say much at all. He answered a couple of questions during the proceeding, but just with 2 or 3 word answers, and did not speak to a gaggle of, an enormous number of assembled cameras outside. He had the opportunity. We know how much he loves a camera, but he decided to hold his fire until tonight at Mar-A-Lago, when he will speak around 8:15.
Jim, it was almost like a Rorschach test, because the people who are really big supporters of Trump says, boy, he looked furious. And then a lot of other people said said, he looked like he was really shaken by this once he was told what the charges were, 34 felonies, not just misdemeanors. It was like a Rorschach test.
Yeah, it always is with him. You sort of see what you want to see, but he did look, to many people today, he did look just tired of this. He's got a campaign to focus on, and this is not going to help him in that regard. Mr. Trump historically has not been terribly good at putting the past behind him, but he needs to do that if he wants to run a campaign.
Good point.
Jim, before we let you go tonight, we know that what a spectacle it was down there all day long. Things seem to be back to normal right now?
Yeah, they are. There weren't very many protesters down here to begin with. There were a couple of pickup trucks that came by with Donald Trump flags, but there were not many protesters here at all. The media outnumbered them vastly, as you can imagine. Yeah, things are kind of back to normal now. You hear the siren behind me, but that has nothing to do with him. He's gone.
There are plenty of sirens all the time in New York City. Jim, a day to remember nonetheless. I really appreciate your reporting tonight.
Good to see all those streets back open. Jim, thank you. Well, earlier today, there was quite a lot going on outside the courtroom.
Yeah, it was a circus. That's what it was. Now, Eyewitness News reporter Sonia Rincon has that part of our coverage from Lower Manhattan.
While there is celebration of Trump's arrest, most of those not here to support Trump say they're supporting the justice system.
We demand justice now!
Like the Manhattan grand jury that indicted a former president for the first time.
He's innocent until proven guilty, like all other Americans, and he needs to face the indictments.
I need to be here, and I need to voice my opinion that it's so important to make people that commit crimes to extend the hand of the law and make them pay for the consequences of their actions.
That doesn't mean there isn't taunting, even though barriers separate his supporters from those showing their distaste for Trump. There was the occasional confrontation when demonstrators crossed over, and officers sometimes stepping in. But Trump supporters here argue that any turnout, especially the big media turnout, will only help the former president, even if he's convicted.
Even if they get him on a few charges, everybody knows it's bogus charges.
This man from Brooklyn says he went to Washington on January 6th and became a supporter back in 2016.
The media has not stopped covering him. It's been nonstop since he won the election, and all the impeachments and all this circus stuff with the courts. It's I think it's publicity for him.
His support is already growing. You can see it in the polls.
That was Sonia Rincon reporting. She spent the day down in Lower Manhattan as well. Still much more to sift through with all these charges against Mr. Trump. So we're bringing in some extra help.
Yes, joining us now live is adjunct professor of law at Fordham, Jerry Goldfeder. Jerry, thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Good to be with you.
So I want to begin with defense strategy before we kind of pour through again the 34 count of charges. Donald Trump is on this plane right now. He's heading back to Mar-A-Lago. He's sitting with his campaign strategists and also probably his attorneys trying to figure out a way to fight back against these 34 felonies that he's now been charged with. So what is their best strategy?
Well, for his sake, I hope he's sitting with his attorneys, because this is a serious matter. And what happens on the campaign trail has nothing to do with what happens in this courtroom. I think that their strategy will be, number one, to try to remove the judge. This judge presided over the Trump Organization case, knows Trump, knows his work, knows the organization, and I think Trump thinks that the judge is unfavorable. I think that his effort to remove the judge will fail. Number two, he will try to move this case out of New York County because he thinks he won't get a fair trial. I think that, too, will fail. And then he will make a motion to dismiss the indictment. And there are legal issues involved. He can argue that the evidence before the grand jury did not warrant an indictment. He can argue that the law is so twisted that it doesn't make sense and it's not valid. And the judge this judge is a real lawman. He's serious. he's sober, he will decide it on the law. So anything that Trump says outside the courtroom will have no effect on this court. But he will make those efforts to try to get an advantage, or at least reduce the disadvantages that he has in court.
So Liz wanted you to talk about the defense. I'm going to talk about the prosecution a little bit here. Judge Juan Merchan has been trashed by Mr. Trump publicly, which was maybe not the smartest thing to do to the judge who could determine your fate. But more importantly, the judge has already overseen the trial of one guilty verdict with Mr. Trump's organization, and it wasn't that different, really, right? He was paying the cars and everything else, and tuition for for his workers' grandchildren, and then using it as the tax deduction. That's what he did here, really, with Stormy Daniels and the other payoffs.
Right. The difference here is that these charges relate to falsifying business records, but they get bumped up to a felony if there is an intent to commit or conceal another crime. And the other crimes that are alleged relate to campaign finance violations. That's the hook that DA Bragg has. And he has to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, that all these payoffs, it's not just Stormy Daniels, there's a few payoffs involved in the indictment, that all these payoffs were done in furtherance of his presidential campaign. And if he proves that beyond a reasonable doubt, and the jury believes that and adopts that view, he'll be convicted.
So DA Bragg talked a lot today about, what this case was about, and he believes that it's about inducing a fraud, a scheme to influence the presidential election. Do we see that path going forward? Did he make that argument today in his news conference?
Well, he didn't have to make his argument today. What he needs to do is bring in witnesses and show documents to the jury. He has at least Michael Cohen, but it looks like from the indictment and the statement of facts that he put out that there are other witnesses. So it's not just Cohen. So there's a bunch of witnesses, I think, who will testify that these payments related to the presidential campaign, and he will show texts and checks and all sorts of other documents as well. And if the evidence is strong enough that he proves Trump's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, there'll be a conviction. So he has to prove this to 12 New Yorkers, that all these transactions related directly to the presidential campaign. It will ultimately be in the hands of 12 New Yorkers sitting as jurors.
Considering the fact that we are hearing a lot about David Pecker and Michael Cohen all working together to try to allegedly help out President Trump before the 2016 presidential election, why is it that we didn't see any conspiracy charges today?
I don't know the answer to that, because it seems like there was a conspiracy, although I will say that during his press conference, the district attorney did reference a particular statute, election law 17152, for those lawyers who are tuning in. And that relates to specifically conspiracy to promote an election by unlawful means. So he didn't charge it, but it's referenced, and it's a necessary part of the indictment.
You said that it was unlikely the trial would be moved, that the defense will ask for it. Where would they go? I mean, in the 5 boroughs of New York, I assume they have to ask for New York.
Trump probably wants Staten Island.
Yeah, the only place he couldn't.
He wants Staten Island, but I don't know where he would go. But the real issue is there a legal basis to change venue? And I don't think so. I really don't.
Okay.
And by the way, just because Manhattanites vote Democratic overwhelmingly doesn't mean we can't find 12 jurors who will be fair and objective.
Well, that's a good point.
It'll be up to the defense and the DA to choose those people.
Okay, that's a very good point, and a good way to end it as well. From the law school at Fordham, Jerry Goldfeder. Jerry, thank you for your time and your insight. It was really interesting.
Thanks so much. And as we continue with Eyewitness News Extra Time, a man who is no stranger to controversy himself, Long Island Congressman George Santos, spoke with Shantae Lance today about why he traveled into the city to show his support for the former president.
Plus, later tonight, Donald Trump is going to speak about today's events, but we won't have to wait much longer. We'll have a live report from Mar-A-Lago, Florida on that. Continue our deep dive into today's historic arraignment of a former U.S. president. Protests popped up in New York, both in support and against one Donald Trump, but both sides remained rather peaceful. That's good.
Yeah, among those showing up in support of the former president, a pair of powerful, controversial Congress members, and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Long Island Representative George Santos, who has had some recent experiences with criminal probes of his own.
Long Island reporter Shantae Lance caught up with the congressman on the phone as he made his way back east earlier this afternoon.
Walk me back a little bit. What helped you make the decision to go down to court in Lower Manhattan?
I believe in the people's right to peacefully assemble and protest. It's well recorded. There's well documentation on this, Shantae. I was a Trump supporter in 2015 when it wasn't cool, when you were made fun of and laughed at because apparently it was just a joke or it was just Trump trying to raise his profile. So why would I not be with him today in the most important day to show solidarity of a DA who has now put us in a very dangerous course for the future? I think this opens precedent for things that I don't want to imagine of, and quite frankly, things that nightmares are made out of.
What do you mean by that, nightmares are made out of?
Well, do we want to engulf ourselves in the next banana republic where political prosecution becomes normalized? What's stopping the next DA from doing it to somebody of the other side? This is just dangerous rhetoric, and it's now weaponization of some sort of office holders. I'm not thrilled, and I wouldn't be thrilled if this was happening to any other president, whether Republican or Democrat. I don't think they're above the law, but you have to have solid, rock-proof evidence of what you're doing.
Mr. Santos, let me ask you this. Does watching the Trump indictment and the arraignment that's soon to happen today, watching this all unfold, does it make you nervous in any extent for yourself?
I don't know, Shantae. Are you implying something I don't know?
No, you're a politician. You mentioned politician. So I was asking, as a politician, does this make you uneasy?
No, it doesn't. It makes me want to fight harder for freedom in our country. This is the United States of America. This is the last place where we defend freedom, and to see these kinds of infantile and cheapening of our democracy and of our justice system happen is infuriating, and if anything, it should serve to energize lawmakers to make sure that we band together for common good, not for political persecution.
And that was Shantae Lance reporting. Coming up next on Extra Time, the Trump saga shifts to Florida.
We're going to have a live report from that state on what to expect when the former president speaks tonight.
Well, former President Donald Trump made a beeline for LaGuardia Airport following his historic arraignment in Manhattan today. Tonight, he's expected to deliver remarks back in Florida. He has just landed back in Florida just a short time ago.
That's him in the plane, though, taking off from LaGuardia Airport. ABC's Melissa Adon joins us live in West Palm Beach near Mar-A-Lago with more on that part of our story. Melissa.
Bill, Liz, what a monumental day. And yes, just in fact, former President Donald Trump arriving to West Palm Beach Airport. So we're expecting, of course, within the next 10 to 20 minutes for him to be traveling over to this area within a motorcade headed to Mar-A-Lago. Of course, that is his estate, and that's where he's expected to share his remarks tonight. And we'll be watching.
Former President Donald Trump, now officially criminal defendant Donald Trump, following his arraignment before a New York City judge on multiple counts. Mr. Trump has insisted he hasn't done anything wrong, and his legal team and other supporters have repeatedly called this political persecution. Trump is now expected back in Florida tonight, where he will deliver his own remarks following the historic arraignment. West Palm Beach law enforcement on alert, sharing to ABC how they have heightened security plans in place in case of major protest. Meantime, supporters running to Trump's defense, speaking with ABC's Rachel Scott.
It's just pure nonsense. Personally, I think it'll bolster his campaign. People want to support him because they see him as an underdog at this point.
According to an ABC News Ipsos poll, 45% of Americans think Trump should have been charged with the crime in this case, while 32% don't think so, and 23% say they don't know. Trump is stepping up his rhetoric against Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg on his social media platform. Cy Vance Jr., the former Manhattan District Attorney who began the criminal investigation into Trump years ago before Bragg eventually charged him, appearing on NBC's Meet the Press.
If I were his lawyer, and believe me, no one is called up to ask for my advice, I would be mindful of not committing some other criminal offense like obstruction of governmental administration, which is interfering with or by threat or otherwise the operation of government.
So we're expecting Trump to speak about 8 o'clock, 8:15 here local time. He's then, of course, addressing a crowd, the media that he invited, but several supporters that we've heard of, other Congress members also saying they're going to be here tonight. Bill?
Are they expecting a lot of people? What's the platform for all this?
Yeah, what's interesting, of course, we're talking about several media, the rooms inside Mar-A-Lago. We were looking at a shot earlier, packed, full, of course, of supporters. Then you have folks such as Representative Gates that says he'll be here. Then we have Marjorie Greene, who was up in New York earlier. She's also traveling down to be here. Roger Stone, we're hearing. So definitely those that want to continue supporting the former president.
Apparently,
Bill?
right. Okay, Melissa, Don, thank you for that, Melissa. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, we got a real taste of spring out there today.
Yeah, it was nice if you were outside and looking at it. Look at that beautiful picture of Lower Manhattan. Coming up next on Eyewitness News Extra Time, meteorologist Jeff Smith joins us with some changes, though, that are on the way.
Jeff, I hear it was a really nice day out there.
Why weren't you guys out enjoying it? I mean, it's just,
a lot of people asking that question right now.
I will not go on with that right now. Here's a look outside, and we look over toward a beautiful sunset about to happen in the next several minutes. 69 degrees out there right now after getting up to 73 earlier this afternoon. Numbers about 16 degrees above average for this time of the year. We do have some changes in the offing, though. Rather dull and dreary as we head into the day tomorrow with an onshore flow developing. Tomorrow we'll be stuck in the 50s. If anything, temperatures can actually slide down into the lower 50s by late in the day. A lot of clouds out there and some drizzle at times. And then all of a sudden we break into some real warmth on Thursday. We're talking temperatures soaring well back up into the 70s, might even hit 80 on a couple of thermometers over interior New Jersey. You destabilize your atmosphere as a front approaches late in the day. And with that, there could be some afternoon thunderstorms. And some of those could cause some locally strong wind gusts and some downpours. The Storm Prediction Center has us in a marginal risk of severe weather by late in the day on Thursday. So the sea breeze taking full effect here on Long Island. You've fallen back down into the 50s, 66 at Belmar, 73 though just inland in Lakehurst. You're 72 Morristown, still in the lower to middle 70s into the northwestern hills of New Jersey. But watch that cloud cover really increase overnight. Could be some patchy fog, some drizzle developing late, and certainly through the day tomorrow. An overcast day out there, decidedly more cloudy than today, and we're talking about those cool temperatures. As we head into later on tomorrow night, might be a little batch of showers, mainly north and west of New York City. Thursday, we try to break out at least some breaks of sun, some partial sun, and that will cause our numbers to get well up into the 70s. But here comes that front late in the day, and along that front, there could be a line of showers and potentially gusty thunder showers. Turning cloudy and with a bit of drizzle and areas of fog later on tonight. We're down to about 52. It's overcast. It is cooler, some drizzle, maybe even a bit of rain at times. 56. It's cloudy with a passing shower tomorrow night, perhaps some drizzle. 52 early. Temperatures rising overnight and continuing to rise on Thursday up to 75. We're calling late Thursday AccuWeather alert material with that thunderstorm threat. Breezy, cooler Friday. The weekend, by the way, looking picture perfect before clouds increase by early next week. Lee has an update tonight at 11 o'clock. Back over to you.
Okay, Jeffrey, thank you very much. And that wraps up this edition of Eyewitness News Extra Time. Liz, we'll see you tomorrow night, that's for sure. We'll be back at 11 o'clock.
Have a great night.